Solidarity as a concept for an engaged university. I found the topic of this conference really challenging regarding how we can define an engaged university. And if you go to the next one, please. I really wanted to focus on our own perspective from CLICE as a Latin American center, where our mission is to contribute to the growth of a fraternal and participative culture through the development of solidarity service learning projects. Even though when we start working with service learning, our main roots came from the North American tradition of service learning, we found that the concept of service was quite different from our solidarity service concept that we would address in Latin America. That's why I decided to focus on those terms according to what Professor Furco said in the pre-conference workshop about the importance to really define the terms with which we were going to be developing our proposal, and with what Lorraine said early today about the importance of the language and the culture that is behind the projects. Next, please. So I will be working on different terms. Solidarity will be our key concept to work, but also how it implies service, learning, community, how they change according to our definition, and how we can reach the engaged university concept. One click more, please. And I will be addressing this through our cultural roots, another one. And as I mentioned before, I feel that most of these things, as we develop service learning through the different experiences, change since the pandemic started. Next, please. So I will follow this presentation with some quotes of Paulo Freire. He is one of our Latin American teachers who we really focus whenever we think about service learning pedagogy. And he said that looking at the past must only be a means of understanding more clearly what and who you are, so you can more wisely build the future. So I just want to make, next please, some references about our roots regarding the service term, mainly within the higher education system. For Latin American institutions, the decision that was taken in Mexico in 1917 was key to develop service within the universities, since they established in their constitutions that higher education graduates had to provide social service to the country. So you can imagine that from then on, they defined in 1936 that social service should be mandatory at the National University in Mexico, and a national law regulated that it was mandatory for every student to graduate to have 360 hours of social service. That was an interesting milestone in the story of service. If we go to the next, please. And in Argentina, we can mark as a key event the university reform movement that was developed in 1918 following the democratic movement that was going throughout Latin America. If you want one more. So in this process, the students really were the ones who promoted this change in the university to open the possibility for every student, every middle class student, to access to the university for free, with universities with a co-government. That means that students and teachers form part of the university government, the university autonomy, academic freedom for professors, and community outreach was established since then. That was one of the key changes that became with the university, not only in Argentina, but it was also promoted to all Latin America, being extension the way to provide service to the people, to the community. If we go next, in this way, service could integrate one of the three pillars, the three missions of the university, and it's named with different names. Please, now there are many names that should be appearing. If you keep clicking, just go through all of them. You might recognize many of them, okay? Outreach, social service, it's okay. No, it's okay, we can move on. If you go next. So within the three missions of the university, you can now identify that community outreach is the place from where the university can offer volunteers to participate in different activities in the community. We can do also extension courses. But what I really like to focus, as I mentioned before, what happened through this time of pandemic. If you keep clicking. So regarding teaching, it's very interesting how in a few days or weeks, all the teaching move online. And this is something that is common for all of us. But also the universities go back, please. Thank you. So it was very interesting how not only the professors did a great effort to move online, but also many universities offer open courses for the community. So the university started to show how much they could offer to the community in these particular times. From the academic side, as I mentioned, open courses were offered and the knowledge of the university was provided to the community. The same happened with research. Many labs and many research programs started trying to provide information about the disease, and many university buildings were open. While the classes were closed, the buildings were still open to receive people who might need a shelter or might need to be in quarantine. And a lot of research was developed trying to offer the information or the accompaniment that they might need. And for example, an interesting research was developed by the University of Buenos Aires, the psychology department, about how to deal with autistic children during this time of pandemic. So also from the research side of the university, they showed that they could provide a lot and meaningful service to the community. And of course, from the outreach mission, thousands of volunteers from the universities went out to the community dining rooms to prepare popular pots. They went to help at the hotels where people was doing their quarantines, were doing busing plans for the elders. So from the three different missions, we could see in this particular time how much the university has to offer to the community. So we will keep reflecting on this to see, okay, should we have to wait for this pandemic to develop so much for the community? Let's move to the next one. Okay, so these are a couple of examples of students from the University of Cauca in one of the 8 library days in the city of Popayán in Colombia. Students that used to appear in the newspapers due to the protest looking for a better education now are in the news for the help they are providing to the community. And students from the University of La Plata in Argentina participate in the virus detection operations in vulnerable neighborhoods. What is particularly interesting regarding to that experience is that whenever they go to the neighborhoods, they need to go with local partners to be able to enter that. So an interesting network is being developed to be able to move along with these activities. Next, please. So keep moving, please. So if we think about service, we can identify the community, in this case, university community, serving a community that is in need. So this could be the benefactors who knows or has the tools and knowledge that can have an active role giving to these beneficiaries, those who need, that in this particular situation, due to the illnesses or due to the economical situation, need and receives in a passive role. Go next, please. So students might learn to help, but we need to, one more, thank you. And the community needed learns to be helped, because in this particular time that they can't go out, they need to be helped. And it's not easy sometimes to understand that the best way to help is to remain passive. And this is something that pandemia brought. For us, sometimes the best way to help is not to go out, not to do anything that can make risks for others. But where we want to go is to the horizontal model, to the solidarity model that we promote, where both communities knows and ignores, has and needs. Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. Sometimes we give and we generally receive more from the other partners, and we both have an active role. If we go next. This is an example of students of the University of Buenos Aires who are working in the slum. One more click, please. That they are working in a vulnerable neighborhood, but after working for so many times, they have a very good bond with the community. So they went to take food to those families who couldn't go out, but the other families were also involved in providing goods to the others. So they were all working together, and that's why we make this difference between service and solidarity, because we put the emphasis on sharing, to do together, to do with, in a bond that generates brotherhood. One more. So here you can clearly see the difference between giving and sharing, doing for and doing with, and this is something we also take into account, for example, as we see it in research, in community research, when we do for or when we do with, between paternalistic and fraternal, when we really want to empower, and we have a reciprocal learning and promoting pro-social attitudes. And this is something that it's very important to recognize rights, to search for social justice. Next, please. So when we address solidarity within a service learning project, we understand solidarity as the ethical motivation. And it's also a methodology to approach community, for the alliances we need to develop the projects, to build networks, to reciprocally learn one from each other. It's a pedagogy and research method to learn with the community and from them too. If we go next. One more. So I will leave for a while this reflection that was made for one of our solidarity leaders in Argentina. How can we move from this emotion that we might feel whenever we participate in one of these activities with our neighbors or the similars? How can we move from the emotion to a long-lasting commitment? How we turn an emotion into a culture of solidarity? Next, please. If we think about service learning, sometimes we feel that they go in two parallel ways. And with this type of pandemic, video conferencing was the key, was the way to develop learning. And on the other side, solidarity sometimes might be developed through online donations, for example, for the Red Cross. But through service learning, we want to blend learning and solidarity service. So if we go to the next slide, please. You can see here two different examples of how service learning is being developed nowadays. Medical and nursing students from the University of Moron went to vaccinate elders against the flu while they were waiting to be served at the bank. It was cold, it was winter, they were waiting there, taking the risk of getting COVID. So students went to look for them to vaccinate and to put into practice what they were studying at the medical school. On the right side, mechatronics students from the National University of Trujillo in Peru repair mechanical ventilators for the local hospital in the university workshop. They went to the university workshops to contribute with the materials that were needed for the hospitals, applying everything that they had learned within their studies. If you go next. So please go. I'm sorry about the presentation. So just one more. Okay, thank you. So we understand solidarity service learning as a real verifiable solidarity project working with the community, not only for it, where students are actively engaged and they show their leadership throughout the project. And their learning contexts are intentionally linked to social activities through curriculum content, research, reflection, citizenship, and job skills. Next, please. So which kind of service learning we talk about whenever we speak about solidarity? We have to actively chosen between service learning as charity and service learning as social change. Social change is closely aligned with the social justice agenda, where the aim is to work towards a society in which individuals and groups are accorded equally in treatment and where there is a just share of opportunities and benefits in society. If we go next. So we can find different service learning projects. Sometimes service and learning goals are not very well connected, not very relevant. Sometimes in case of needs like this pandemic time, service might be the one who would lead the activities. Sometimes learning will be needed to develop better research, for example. But what we aim is a quality service and learning strongly linked and equally relevant. One click, please. Where the more challenging and meaningful the solidarity service is, the more significant the learning will be regarding the motivation, regarding the impact, regarding the meaningful that the content will become due to the service the students can provide with it. Next, please. But I also wanted to share this, that how service learning also changed with this time of pandemic, because we were used to face-to-face solidarity, going to the neighborhoods to hug each other, to meet face-to-face. But if you start clicking, we were used to the traditional service learning where we could go to the different organizations, places. The picture on the top left belongs to my first service learning project at the Children's Hospital, where we should go with the children to share educational materials and games, that both service and learning were doing on-site. When the pandemic started, as I mentioned before, many students went out to the streets, even though they were also at risk, but they decided to do the service that was needed face-to-face while they were doing their studies, their learning virtually. So we can start seeing different types. Service is on-site and the teaching is online. On the left bottom, you can see some projects that were being developed right before pandemia, where students would learn on site, but the service they would provide it online. That is an example of Chilean students that would provide virtual advice to NGOs that were very far from their university. This is interesting to take into account to show the possibility that even though now we cannot connect or we cannot visit some of the organizations, we can still provide a meaningful service virtually. And the last one at the bottom right, it's an experience that I really like because I found that nowadays, for example, students of the University of Madrid are really are continuing their service learning projects at the Children's Hospital, developing it online, having the nurses as their partners to provide connectivity, cell phones, computers, or whatever, so they can connect with the students to participate in entertainment activities and have a good time even though they are hospitalized. If we go next. So this time is also changing how we think about education and the link about students and professors. Nowadays, students have more skills about technology than most of the professors. So we need to start looking at them to see how we can deal with the technology we need to develop not only the courses, but also, for example, in this case, to use 3D printers to prepare masks. Go next. So experiential learning, that it's key for service learning, will provide us a knowledge that emerges only through invention and reinvention, through the restless, impatient, continuum, hopefully inquiry human beings pursue the world with the world and with each other. And we need to recognize that nowadays the knowledge is distributed in the cloud. If we go next, when everything started, Tanya had already seen this map because we developed it together when we did a webinar when pandemic started, to start identifying experiences, service learning experiences that are being developed around the world. With a simple map that we could develop, we could gather a lot of information around the world to learn about the practices that are being developed by the educational institutions in the different countries. You are more than invited to share yours. And one more, please. And regarding sharing information and gathering information and this distributed knowledge, we might also ask ourselves, where is the community? Who is the community now to address the service learning projects? And now Paulo Freire helps me again with this definition. No one saves himself. No one saves anyone. We all save ourselves in community. And I like this image that because it's from a Padlet, a collaborative board that was developed by professors at the University of Chile to share their strategies about how to move on with virtual teaching in this time of pandemia. So I was reminding about the community of practice that today Lorraine mentioned earlier, and sometimes to be able to develop food service learning projects, we first need to start thinking about where is our closest community that can help us out with the projects if we want to be an engaged university. And sometimes we need to learn to talk to each other, with our partners, with our teachers, and then also, of course, to start working and identifying key partners within the community. I have prepared, because I also want to listen to you, I've been through many different concepts that I think might help us think about how we can start thinking about what does it mean if you go next, what does it mean to become an engaged university. That's the topic of our conference. I added in pandemic times or in the new normal, because as I showed you through the different examples, there are many things that we are learning during these days that we need to be to pay a lot of attention how we are going to move along with all this.